911?
There is a dead body on the side of the road.
You know if it's male or female?
It was very clear that she had been beaten up. She was involved in a very physical altercation.
Now we have to start running down the details.
Surveillance footage was really paramount in this investigation. Why did she need that money? Could she have gotten in trouble? She's gone, and now he's throwing things away right when he gets home. Something just didn't look right, and it raised our suspicion.
Where'd you go? Home sure home. Well, the camera doesn't lie.
Eileen Gowan is celebrating her birthday with her family.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday, Mom.
She didn't like getting older, that's for sure. But she still looked good for being 60.
Okay, let me get this food ready. I'm starving.
She was getting her buzz on cooking, just in her element in the kitchen. She was an awesome cook.
Can I help?
You can get me another beer.
Eileen and Sam were dating off and on for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years.
My mom was married 3 times. I believe she was a hopeless romantic, and she was always looking for that right person.
Cheers.
Cheers. She definitely wanted things to work with Sam. It seemed like they were having a pretty good day together. She just loved that we were all together. I just wish I would have done more. I wish I could have made it more special.
How can I help you, ma'am?
I need to report a missing person.
Nicole came into police records and reported her mother missing on the 14th of February, 2023. She last heard from her mother the morning of the 13th.
I spoke to her at like 8:30 in the morning, and she told me that Sam kicked her out and she had nowhere to go. There was arguing going on and it wasn't good. So a friend of hers, Mike, offered to let her stay for a couple days. I didn't have Mike's number. I called Sam. He said he hasn't heard from her. It just was very odd to me. I was worried.
I'll get an officer to look at this.
So Nicole provided us with 2 names: Sam Brammer, Eileen's on-again, off-again boyfriend, and Mike Brockman, who she was currently living with. So we needed to speak with both of them. Right away on the 15th of February, we reached out to Sam Brammer and requested an interview with him. The missing persons case was initially assigned to Sergeant Ted Roberts.
I'm the sergeant that you talked to on the phone. My name's Ted Roberts. You know, Eileen, she's never done this kind of thing before. She's never just, took off and gone.
What she does is she comes to me, she's moved in with me 4 or 5 times. But usually when she moves in with me, she stays away from home.
He explains that they would be together, they would get in these arguments, and they would break up.
Sam tells detectives that Eileen messaged him on February 13th, the same day that Nicole last heard from her mom.
She texted me.
Okay.
And wanted to know if I would come and get her.
He said she needed a ride from Sugar's Diner to Mike Brockman's residence.
My mom was working at Sugar's in Council Bluffs as a server. She would come in at 5, 6 in the morning and clean it and then serve for the morning shift and then come back for her afternoon shift.
Sam says that he picked up Eileen in his 1999 Ford F-150 at 8:30 in the morning. They leave Sugar's Diner, and he takes her to Mike Brockman's residence.
I pull up, she gets in the truck. We take off and drop her off there. Then I'm left.
It's about 2.5 miles from Sugar's Diner. He would have dropped her off there at about 8:40 in the morning.
Sam indicated that he had not heard from her again.
When Sam mentions that, it certainly makes us want to talk to Mike sooner than later.
Detectives bring in Mike Brockman for questioning.
Detective Brannigan. This is Sergeant Roberts. Thanks for coming in today.
Law enforcement wants to know when was the last time Mike Brockman saw Eileen? How did that relationship work or go?
Tell me how you met Eileen.
Mike said he's a regular patron of Sugar's Diner. He knows Eileen from frequenting that business. We asked him if he had any type of contact with Eileen.
Was there ever anything sexual between you and Eileen?
He flat out denied that. He said he had no desire to have an intimate relationship with her.
Why was Eileen staying at your place?
He allowed her to stay on his couch and stay there for a short period of time. On Sunday night, had a conversation with her that that was going to be her last night. She needed to find another place to stay. And he would take her to work that morning on the 13th, Monday morning, and he would come pick her up, gather her things, and he would take her wherever she wanted to go.
What time did you drop Eileen off at Sugar's Diner Monday morning?
He said he dropped her off at about 5 in the morning.
Thanks, Mike.
And he says he worked all day. He arrives home around 5 o'clock in the evening, so he waits until about 8 p.m. He still hasn't heard from Eileen.
What did you do then?
So he gathers up Eileen's belongings. He drives to Sugar's himself and drops them off.
Mike's account is directly contradicted by Sam's interview that he picked up Eileen and he drove her straight out to Mike Brockman's house.
Both Sam and Mike are released, pending further investigation.
Police are now trying to verify the stories that they've received from Sam and from Mike. First thing they do is start looking for video. So they reach out to Sugars.
Morning. I'm Sergeant Roberts. This is Detective Brannigan.
Morning.
We'd like to ask you some questions.
That morning, Eileen came in early. She did her cleaning, then she left at 8:30 in the morning.
Was there anything odd or unusual about Eileen's mood or behavior?
She was supposed to be back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she didn't show up. It was completely out of the ordinary.
Do you have any surveillance cameras on the premises?
Sugar's Diner has a camera out the back door, has a camera at the front, at the entrance. What we're hoping to see is Eileen come to work and how she's acting. We want to make sure that she's, first off, acting normal.
Can you start just before 8:30 a.m. on the backdoor camera? Stop.
There's Eileen.
We see Eileen walking across the video screen. She leaves work. She doesn't look like she's in any type of distress.
Okay, keep playing.
They're really hoping that, as that camera advances, that they will be able to see what happens next, where she goes, who she's with. Sam indicated that he was driving her out, and he had a fairly distinctive truck. He had a Ford F-150.
Rewind and play that again.
It's grammar.
We see Sam's truck drive directly in front of that camera angle.
Play that again. Stop. Zoom in.
We can clearly see Eileen sitting in the passenger seat of that truck. So that confirms the statement from Sam that he did pick her up that morning at 8:30, and she was healthy, alive, and with him voluntarily.
It's time to start trying to verify Mike Brockman's story. He had indicated that he had dropped Eileen's belongings off that evening at the back door of Sugar's.
Show me the camera that covers the back. Play just before 8 p.m. Stop there.
We can clearly see Mike Brockman removing some items from his truck and leaving them at the back door. And then he gets back in his truck and he drives off. So he was telling us the truth. Now we know that at 8:30 in the morning that she's alive and well in the passenger seat of Sam Brammer's truck. At about 8 o'clock at night, Mike Brockman is dropping off her belongings at the back door. So we need to be able to put more things into that timeline. We need to know where she was at what time, who she was with, what she was doing. We don't have any of this information yet.
See, now police have to start running down the details. Does Mike Brockman have an alibi for his whereabouts on the day of February 13th? And so detectives went to his work.
The manager pulled up his timesheets on the morning of the 13th. He clocks in around 6 o'clock in the morning. Mike Brockman was still there talking with coworkers when she left around 4 o'clock. Mike Brockman was at work all day long on the 13th, just like he told us.
Mike has a pretty solid alibi. So Sam Bramer was the last one that has been seen with her at 8:30 in the morning.
Investigators switch gears.
The police are trying to find out who has spoken with Eileen, who has seen Eileen after Sam had picked her up from Sugar's. So they reach out to friends and family, and they end up speaking with Eileen's mom, Kathleen, at Dudley Court Apartments.
Kathleen tells detectives that Eileen visited her at around 8:45 a.m.
How was Eileen when you saw her on February 13th?
Kathleen said that she was acting completely normal.
What did Eileen do when she came in?
Kathleen said that she went into the apartment, went straight into the bedroom where the safe is kept, retrieved the safe, and she left the apartment. That safe had about $1,200 into it, according to her mom. That's a pretty good, sizable amount of money.
Eileen's visit to her mom's apartment conflicts with Sam's account of her movements that morning.
Sam's interview indicated that he picked up Eileen at Sugar's at 8:32, and he drove her straight out to Mike Brockman's house. He lived north and east of Sugar's, about 5-10 minutes away. Eileen's mom's apartment is around 15 minutes west of Sugar's, and if he drove her straight out to Mike Brockman's house, then she couldn't be at her mom's apartment at about 8:45 a.m., 10 minutes later. So law enforcement is looking to try to verify again the accuracy of the statements. They're able to acquire the surveillance footage from the Dudley Court Apartments.
Okay, start just before 8:40 a.m.
So at about 8:45 in the morning, we see Eileen enter Dudley Court. She comes in through the foyer. She gets on the elevator.
Next camera.
And then we see her come off the elevator on the second floor. And she walks directly to her mom's apartment.
Then she goes off camera. And then about 5 minutes later, you can see her coming out.
She's carrying the safe.
It was a small black safe with a handle on top. Why did she need that money? Did she need to just get away from everything for a little while? Or could she have gotten in trouble? Did she need to pay somebody off?
Back to the lobby camera.
She exits out of the lobby.
Unfortunately, there's no cameras that cover where she goes once she leaves. She's not seen with Sam Bramer, but he's the one that left Sugar's with her. And 15 minutes later, she's on camera at Dudley Court Apartments. So this is certainly pretty good evidence that she is still with Sam Bramer during this period of time.
Across town, Eileen's family struggles with her disappearance.
As time went, we became more and more concerned.
My brother Jack made a missing person flyer.
And we all went, every gas station, every bar, I mean, just every business that would let us put it up.
Hey there, it's Eileen Gowan. Leave a message.
I was calling her, blowing her phone up, no response. My mom was my best friend. And so I knew I had to stay strong for the girls, but believe me, there was times that I couldn't.
Investigators refocus on Sam's movements on February 13th. They review the data from traffic cameras to trace where he went that day.
Sam told us that he picked her up at 8:30, took her to Mike Brockman's house, and he went back home.
There are a couple of surveillance cameras that were positioned between Sugar's and Mike Brockman's house that captured the highway. Sam's truck is not captured on that video. But Sam's truck is identified at 9:28 a.m. on the 13th, heading westbound on West Broadway at about 36th Street, which would be leading into Omaha, Nebraska. Still not in the direction of Mike's house, which is north and east of town.
The next surveillance camera photograph we receive is Sam returning, now traveling eastbound at the same location at 10:28 a.m., 1 hour later. So for 1 hour, he's somewhere in Nebraska. There is someone in the passenger side, but you can't see the passenger's face. Something just didn't look right, and it raised our suspicion.
Investigators invite Sam to the police department for a second interview.
We began talking with him again about his movements that day. Now this time, he knows that we have some questions. He's prepared, and he gives us a little bit more information.
So I went and picked her up, and she got in the truck, but she didn't want to go home right away. So me and her just went right down Broadway, and then she wanted to stop at her mom's house.
He tells us, well, I didn't take her straight to Mike Brockman's house. First, she needed to go see her mom. So we went to Dudley Court.
I stopped at her mom's house, and she was in there for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. She come out of there, got back in. She just said she wanted to talk to her mom. That's what she told me.
Did she come out with anything? Did she have anything?
She had a purse, and she had a black safe with her. She wanted to talk to me about helping her get in the apartment.
Now we know what that money was for. That money was to put down on an apartment, the deposit, first month's rent. We received video photos from Sherwood Apartments and located them walking up to the door, seeing that the office doors were closed, and then they left.
That confirms that part of his story, but he still ends up with the story that he drops her off at Mike Brockman's house.
Okay, and this somewhere off of there is where you drove her on.
As soon as I pulled up, and she didn't want me going to the driveway in case he was there, and that's when I went straight, turned around, and came back.
Okay.
And I hit straight home.
We know that he didn't take her to Mike Brockman's house because we have the video of him going back west.
We have a camera at 36th and Broadway, and we have your truck going westbound at 9:28 a.m. going to Omaha.
I told you, I went straight home. I don't remember going to Omaha.
Well, the camera doesn't lie. And then 1 hour later, you're coming back from Omaha, and you're going eastbound coming back into Council Bluffs. 1 hour later. Where'd you go?
I went straight home.
I know that he's not telling me the truth. I don't know why he's lying to me yet, but there's a lot of things that just aren't adding up.
We'd like to look a little bit further in your phone and get the location information off of it so that we can see where you went during that time. Okay?
We applied for search warrants for Sam and Eileen's phone. We can find out the movements of their phones.
While investigators wait for the phone data, they review the surveillance footage from the apartments where Sam lives.
Play the camera that faces the parking lot.
That's Sam's truck.
This camera angle shows Sam Brammer arriving home at 12:59 on the 13th, the day that Eileen went missing. He gets out, fiddles around with his truck. Sam takes some things out of the truck and walks away.
What's he got in the bag?
Is there a camera that shows where Sam goes?
Right at the entrance is a dumpster. We can see Sam, and he walks toward that dumpster, carrying whatever it is that he's carrying.
What's he throwing in the trash?
It's hard to tell. Go back to the first camera.
He returns to his truck. He's opening up the doors. He looks like he's cleaning a couple of things out.
Why is he spending so much time in the passenger side?
That door was open, but there's a tree there. It's hard to see exactly what he's doing. Then he closes up the truck and walks back to his apartment. We can clearly see that Eileen's not in the truck at this time. She's gone, and now he's throwing things away right when he gets home. That raises some red flags with me.
By the time we realized that footage existed, it was too late to find out what he put in the dumpster. That dumpster had already been emptied.
Okay, let's just keep watching and see if Sam comes back out to his truck.
The surveillance camera on the 14th shows him leaving in his truck after dark, about 8 p.m.
Fast forward, let's see when he comes back.
He returns at about 10 p.m., so he's gone for about 2 hours. We need to know where Sam went, so we still have some unresolved questions that we would like to talk with him about. We had tried to contact him, leaving messages, but we didn't get any response.
Investigators issue a bolo for Sam and his pickup. A patrol officer spots the truck in Council Bluffs later that afternoon.
Sam is obviously beginning to elude. He speeds up. It's a dangerous pursuit. He's driving recklessly. There's traffic. The speeds are getting pretty high. He's running stop signs. So it's determined that this pursuit needs to end.
A warrant is obtained for Sam's arrest for eluding.
Three days later, Sam Brammer turns up at the police department.
I'm Sam Brammer. I got outstanding warrants. I'm here to give myself up.
I drove straight to the station and prepared to talk to him.
Detective Brannigan questions Sam for a third time about his movements on the day that Eileen disappeared.
I'm trying to really lock him into a final route that he took.
Where did you go between 9:28 and 10:28 with Eileen?
He now admits to having new memories. He now remembers that they did actually travel over across to Omaha.
He said they went to Carter Lake, to the park, which is actually in Omaha. And he said that they fooled around a little bit. So that was his reason for being in Omaha for an hour.
And where did you go then?
I dropped her off at Mike's place. But if you don't believe me, I can show you the route we took.
And I thought, you know, that's a great idea. Let's do that. We turned up 205th Street, and 205th is where Mike Brockman lives. He says, this right here is where I turned around. She got out, grabbed her purse, grabbed her safe, and she just stood there as I drove away. So he's able to claim at that point he has no idea where she went, because he last saw her standing on the side of 205th Street between two homes. I absolutely know he's lying at that point. He never made it there. He never went to 205th Street. So we drive back to his apartment. I pulled up right behind his truck, and I asked him, Sam, do you mind if we take a look in your truck? He says, you're not gonna find anything, he said. We just want to look and see if there's anything in there that tells us that there was a disturbance between you and Eileen inside that truck. So, Detective Fletcher looked inside the vehicle. He didn't see anything completely out of the ordinary. Sam Brammer knew now that we were definitely interested in his truck. We wanted to see inside that truck. But at this point, we only have a missing person. We don't have a crime. So I don't have probable cause to seize or search anything.
Sam is taken back to the station and released on bail for his traffic violations. Investigators refocus on tracing Sam's movements on February 13th, the day Eileen disappeared.
When Sam comes back from Omaha, the traffic camera captures his truck at 10:28, but we didn't know where he went after that. So I requested a couple of our detectives to go canvass every business in that area for any kind of video footage that they could find, and they did just that. We were able to secure video from one of the businesses in this area. It's Burger King in the 3200 block of West Broadway, right by the traffic camera at 36th and Broadway.
Play from there.
We can see Sam Brammer's truck pull up to the drive-thru.
Okay, rewind. Let's have another look.
It captures both him and Eileen in the passenger side. We know it's Eileen, but the way she's positioned is very awkward. It's strange.
Zoom into Eileen.
It looks like her right arm is across her body. She doesn't look right, and all you can see is her lower body. And nothing moves. The whole time that he's sitting there, nothing moves. We watched it several times. I never thought that I would ever see a piece of video footage like this. We started noticing Brammer.
Look at his chest. It's really moving up and down.
He was taking very large breaths. He was gasping. You could see the nervousness on Brammer. After that, we were convinced that Eileen was either hurt very bad and unconscious or already deceased. And then we received a phone call.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Cranberry, Iowa.
What's going on?
So we're driving down the road, and there is a dead body on the side of the road.
You know if it's male or female?
It's female for sure.
On February 26th, a 911 call came in alerting authorities to a body that had been located. I was the on-call supervisor that day, and so that's why I was dispatched to it. I could see that the body was on the side of the roadway in the ditch. The body had jeans on and a coat with a zipper, and I was aware of the clothing that Eileen had last been seen in. So it was pretty apparent that that was her.
Detective? See the black safe box? Nope.
The safe wasn't anywhere in the area. She was missing her glasses. One of her shoes was missing. Her purse was not in the area. Her phone wasn't around her.
When could she have been dumped here?
It had snowed several days before, and so the snow had begun to melt. That's when the body was able to be seen. We could see that there really wasn't snow underneath the body, which suggested that she had been there prior to when it snowed, since roughly the 13th, the day she went missing. There was a laceration on the top of her head, and there was also a ligature mark on her neck that we noted.
The number of contusions and injuries that Eileen sustained, it was very clear that she had been beaten up. She was involved in a very physical altercation. Now my investigation ramps up. Now we absolutely have a homicide.
Investigators contact Eileen's family with the news.
Detective Brannigan, he said, I'm sorry to inform you, but it was your mom's body that we found. I just lost it.
That little sliver of hope is, of course, gone then. You don't ever think that something like this is going to happen to someone you know.
I couldn't tell my daughter that the person she loved so much is never coming back.
I felt between helpless and hopeless. My focus was they better get him before I do.
Detectives secure a warrant to search Sam's apartment and his pickup truck.
The truck wasn't there that night. We had announced ourselves, entered. Sam was inside the residence. He didn't want to talk to us.
Put Sam on the stairs and search the apartment.
Sam shares that apartment with his granddaughter, Emily. We asked Emily what happened to her grandpa's truck.
My grandpa told me to tell anybody who asks about the truck and where it is. He told me to say, I don't know. That's all he told me to say, was I don't know where it is. I told the police officer that a few days prior, my grandpa asked me if I could follow him in his truck to the scrapyard in Carter Lake. He pulled his truck in to go get crushed.
We received still photos from Lakeside Auto Salvage. We can clearly see his truck, his driver's license, and him in his truck. He had the car shredded.
Our belief was that there would have been incriminating forensic evidence in that truck. He was able to get that truck crushed before we were able to get it searched.
We missed that opportunity. It just makes you shake your head. It's unbelievable. What else could happen?
Detectives received Sam's and Eileen's cell phone data from February 13th.
We were able to triangulate their locations with cell towers. The information that we received shows the phones traveling together up until about 11 o'clock in the morning. And right about that time, the phones are no longer communicating, which means they were either turned off or they were placed on airplane mode.
Investigators search for surveillance cameras close to the location of the last ping from Eileen's phone.
We were able to find some surveillance video from a Department of Transportation camera out in Trainer, Iowa, on Highway 92.
At 11:46 a.m. on February 13th, a camera captures Sam Brammer's pickup.
Sam's truck is seen traveling east on Highway 92 through Trainer, Iowa. And he drives out of sight, continuing east. And at 12:34, we again see Sam's truck, this time traveling on Highway 92 back toward Council Bluffs. Now we can clearly see through his windshield as he's driving. He's the only person inside that truck. But Eileen's phone is with him. Sam continues all the way to his home. When he gets home at 12:59, we know Eileen is not in that truck because he has it all opened up. I believe that Sam dumped her somewhere east of Trainer. Just to get her out of his truck, he needed to find someplace to hide her quickly.
The next day, we know he's gone for 2 hours on the 14th, as we see the surveillance video showing him leaving the apartment complex about 8 p.m. and returning at 10 p.m. That would have been plenty of time for him to drive, retrieve her body, take her to the different location, and drop her body on Mormon Bridge Road. Law enforcement is really, looking at motive at this point. So we've obtained Sam's bank records.
I came upon one deposit that occurred on the 15th of February. This was a deposit of $1,200 in cash. This amount of money matches the amount of money that should have been in the safe that Eileen had. Video from the bank does show Sam Brammer enter the bank and give cash to the teller.
This was very significant because Eileen has a safe that has $1,200 cash in it that has gone missing, and then 2 days later, he's showing up at the bank depositing, coincidentally, $1,200 in cash. He had taken possession of her safe.
So at this point, we had enough probable cause to issue warrants for Sam Brammer's arrest.
On May 24th, Sam Brammer is arrested.
He was formally charged in August of 2023 with second-degree murder. And then the trial began in mid-November.
Prosecutors lay out the events that led to Eileen's murder.
Sam picked her up at Sugar's at 8:32. He drove her to her mom's apartment where she retrieved the safe. Then they started heading westbound through the city of Council Bluffs, across to Omaha. They drove to Carter Lake.
Well, no. Come on. Come on, jump on this beautiful day. Come on. Come here.
Stop.
I posited to the jury that he's assaulting her with something more than his fist, something significant enough to cause a laceration to the left side of her scalp. He brutally assaulted her while he was choking her, and during that assault, she died. He then puts her back in the truck and heads back into Council Bluffs. At 10:36 a.m., she can be seen now awkwardly slumped in the drive-thru at Burger King. We have cell phone data and the surveillance video that showed that he was heading east toward Trainer, where he dumped her body. Shortly thereafter, he's heading back westbound, back into Council Bluffs, without Eileen. And then he arrives back home, the Cottonwood Apartments. He grabs something from the bed of the truck, and we see him walk across and deposit that item in the dumpster. The next day, he's leaving the apartment complex about 8 p.m. to collect her body from maybe where it had initially been dumped to where it ultimately ends up north of town at Mormon Bridge Road and 152nd. Then Sam Brammer deposited $1,200 cash, probably taken from her safe. On January 18th, 2024, the judge sentenced Sam Brammer to the maximum of 65 years in prison for murder in the second degree, abuse of a corpse, and theft in the second degree. Mike Brockman was cleared of any wrongdoing whatsoever.
Surveillance footage was really paramount in this investigation.
Even though the crime itself was not captured on video, almost the entire before and almost the entire after was captured on surveillance video.
Without the cameras, we would have possibly never solved this crime.
It was partial release when we found out that he was guilty. But then the other part of it is it didn't bring Mom back. So I would give anything to talk to my mom one more time.
I just miss her big personality, and it's infuriating that someone could take that for no good reason. I would just choose to remember her as somebody who was always willing and able to do her best for her kids and her grandkids.
She was funny. She loved life. She had this weird laugh that was contagious. She was just a great person. Whenever I needed her, whether it was in the middle of the night or she had something going on, she would stop what she's doing and come to be with me. Just anything. She was there. So I love and miss her very much.
Next time on Sino Evil.
Cause of death had been ruled a homicide. They said it was very clear strangulation.
I noticed the several cameras. We see the suspect. We need to find out who he is. I want to get this person off the streets immediately.
It began with a photograph found in a rusted box at the back of a police archive, a face frozen in time, half smiling, unaware that she would soon vanish from the streets of New York and be remembered only through yellowed headlines and whispered stories. In March of 1978, the city pulsed with chaos and disco lights, but behind the glamour and noise was a quiet horror waiting to unfold. Her name was Ellen Ward, 26, an art student at Cooper Union, last seen leaving a late-night cafe on East Houston. Witnesses said she waved goodbye to a friend, crossed the street, and disappeared into the fog rising from a subway grate. No one saw her again. The next morning, the fog lifted, and her sketchbook was found on the steps of a closed synagogue, pages torn, some soaked in rain. Detectives at the 9th Precinct called it a disappearance with strange undertones, a phrase that would haunt the file for decades. Ellen's mother called the station every day for 3 months. Each time, the officer on duty told her the same thing. No updates, no suspects, no body. The case went cold before the summer heat arrived. Over the years, evidence was lost, boxes mislabeled, leads forgotten. But something about Ellen's file refused to die. In 2022, a city archivist named Daniel Rice stumbled upon that rusted box while digitizing old case materials. Inside were photographs, notes typed on faded paper, and one sealed envelope marked "Do Not Process." It had never been opened. Rice turned it over to the cold case unit, a small division working from a cramped office in Brooklyn, a handful of detectives chasing ghosts from another era. When they broke the seal, they found a single Polaroid, grainy, underexposed, showing a woman lying on the floor of what looked like a small apartment. In the corner of the image, a wall calendar read April 1978, and on the back, written in blue pen, were 3 words. She said no. The image sent ripples through the department. Could it be Ellen? Forensic analysts enhanced the photo, comparing facial features, freckles, jawline. It matched. Then came the second discovery. The Polaroid had a fingerprint, faint but legible, trapped in the emulsion layer. Modern DNA extraction wasn't possible in the 70s, but now, in 2022, it was. A week later, the lab called. The print matched a retired NYPD officer now 83 years old, living quietly in upstate New York. His name, Richard Doyle. Back in 1978, Doyle had been a decorated sergeant at the same precinct that handled Ellen's case. To most, he was a local hero, calm under pressure, sharp with details, respected by the force. He'd received commendations for bravery, appeared in newspapers shaking hands with mayors, but among a few colleagues, whispers lingered. That he had a temper, that his nights off were unpredictable, that sometimes he showed up at scenes he hadn't been assigned to, none of it ever stuck. When detectives arrived at Doyle's cottage in autumn 2022, they found him in a recliner by the window, staring at the lake. The moment they mentioned Ellen Ward, his expression didn't change, but his hands trembled slightly on the armrest. He told them he remembered the case, said it haunted him, claimed he'd tried his best but couldn't find the girl. Yet, when they showed him the Polaroid, he froze. The silence stretched. One of the detectives described it later as the kind of quiet that feels heavier than words. The search warrant followed. Inside his home, investigators found dozens of old case files stacked in milk crates, unsanctioned copies he had taken from the precinct before retiring. Buried among them was Ellen's missing person report, annotated in red ink. Beside her name, a note read, "She wouldn't listen." It took 2 months to piece together a pattern. Doyle had been assigned to Ellen's neighborhood the night she vanished. His patrol log from that shift had been marked "Lost in Flood Damage," a convenient erasure. But digital reconstruction of precinct microfilms revealed a partial copy, showing his patrol car parked 3 blocks from Ellen's last known location. He never reported that. When questioned, he said memory faded. that he might have driven through by coincidence. Still, forensics found something else. Beneath layers of dust in Doyle's garage, wrapped in oilcloth, an old service revolver registered to him, its serial number filed off. Ballistics matched it to an unreported weapon type mentioned vaguely in a 1979 internal memo related to an unauthorized firearm incident. And the kicker, traces of female DNA on the grip, degraded but sufficient for mitochondrial comparison. It was Ellen's. News broke like lightning. New York 1978 cold case solved. Retired officer linked to decades-old murder. The headline echoed through every major network. Journalists dug up archives, families of other missing women came forward, and the city that had long moved on suddenly found itself dragged back into the dark. The mayor issued a statement calling it a reckoning for the past. But inside the precinct, older officers remembered Doyle as the man who mentored rookies, who brought coffee on overnight shifts, who cried when his partner was shot. The duality unsettled everyone. Could a man serve justice by day and bury secrets by night? When detectives presented the evidence, Doyle didn't deny it. He simply said she wouldn't stop screaming, then looked out the window again. No trial followed. He died in custody 3 weeks later, a stroke during transfer. The confession was deemed sufficient to close the file, but for Ellen's family, closure felt hollow. Her remains were never found. Only that Polaroid remained, proof of her final moments, and the 3 words scrawled on the back that summed up the horror of a life cut short. Even now, the story lingers in the city's memory. On East Houston, there's a mural of Ellen's face painted by former art students. Each year, candles appear beneath it. Passers-by stop, stare, wonder who she was. To most, it's just another old tragedy, but for the detectives who handled the case, the image of that Polaroid remains etched in their minds. They say sometimes, during long nights at the office, they still hear the sound of a camera shutter echoing faintly, like the city itself remembering what it tried so long to forget. The news of Richard Doyle's confession spread through New York like a crack in old pavement, widening with each passing hour. Reporters camped outside the precinct where the cold case unit worked, cameras flashing through rain-streaked glass, microphones thrust at detectives who refused to answer. For days, the city seemed to speak of nothing else. Talk shows debated how a decorated officer could become the monster he once swore to hunt. Retired cops called in, their voices trembling with disbelief or guilt, and at the center of it all was a single black and white photo on every screen. Ellen Ward's smiling face, cropped from her art school ID, staring out from under the bold headline, "Justice, 44 years late." But justice, as the city soon learned, was never that simple. When the autopsy lab finalized its report on Doyle's body, something unexpected appeared. Under his fingernails were traces of old cellulose fibers, consistent with vintage photographic film. Investigators realized he might have been handling Polaroids right before his arrest, possibly destroying evidence. A deeper search of his property began. 2 weeks later, divers from the state police recovered a waterproof metal trunk at the bottom of the lake behind his cottage. Inside were several sealed plastic bags, each labeled with dates from the late 1970s and early 1980s. They contained rolls of undeveloped film, rusted jewelry, and handwritten notes. One of those notes bore a name that would reopen more wounds, Marianne Keller, April 1979. Keller had been a nurse at Bellevue Hospital, last seen walking home after a double shift. Her case, too, had gone cold. The similarity in handwriting between the note and the markings on Ellen's Polaroid was undeniable. When the film was carefully processed, ghostly images emerged, blurred figures, a woman's face in partial profile, a room with floral wallpaper. Forensic analysts spent days enhancing every frame, revealing something that sent chills through the task force. Doyle himself appearing in the background of one shot, captured in a mirror, holding the camera. By December 2022, the investigation had shifted from a single cold case to a suspected serial pattern hidden within the police force. Federal agents joined the probe. Files once dismissed as random disappearances were pulled from archives, some dating back to the late 60s. A digital map lit up with red pins marking the last known locations of several missing women. Most had vanished within Doyle's patrol sectors. The department, already fragile under public scrutiny, began to fracture. A leaked internal memo suggested that complaints about Doyle's unorthodox methods had been filed as early as 1976. They were buried, classified as minor disciplinary notes. The officers who signed them were either retired or dead. One surviving sergeant, interviewed by a local paper, admitted that Doyle had been untouchable back then, part of a generation that policed its own and rarely questioned loyalty. "You didn't cross a man like him," the sergeant said, voice breaking. "He knew too much about everyone." As the story unfolded, the public turned its anger toward the institution itself. Vigils turned into protests. Former students of Ellen Ward's art school painted murals demanding transparency. Their slogans sprayed across the walls of the old 9th Precinct. The mayor's office launched a commission to review decades of unsolved cases possibly linked to corrupt officers. Doyle's name became shorthand for a system that had looked away too long. Inside the cold case unit, the atmosphere grew heavier by the day. The detectives, once exhilarated by the breakthrough, now felt trapped in a moral labyrinth. Lieutenant Marcy Torres, who led the team, barely slept. She spent nights revisiting audio tapes from the original investigation, listening for nuances others had missed. In one recording, dated April 12, 1978, a young patrolman reported seeing a police vehicle idling near an alley off Bowery around midnight. The plate number was smudged in the logbook but faintly resembled Doyle's. The patrolman's name was Thomas Riley. When Torres searched for him, she discovered he had resigned from the force in 1980 and vanished from public records shortly after. A background check found no driver's license, no social security activity, nothing, as if he'd been erased. Torres reopened the box from Doyle's cottage. Among the artifacts was a silver lighter engraved with the initials TR. The fingerprints had been wiped, but microscopic traces of dried blood remained. The lab confirmed it wasn't Ellen's. What began as one solved murder was turning into a spiral of unanswered questions. The press dubbed it the Badge Murders. Conspiracy theorists flooded online forums, speculating about a hidden network of officers covering for one another. A podcast called Cold Case Confessions released a 3-hour special titled The Ghosts of Doyle, drawing millions of listeners. But behind the noise, the truth was stranger, quieter, and far more terrifying. In January 2023, a retired forensics technician came forward with a memory. She recalled Doyle visiting the evidence room several times after hours in 1979, signing the log under false case numbers. He'd claimed to be checking materials for court prep. When she questioned it, he told her not to worry, said he was cleaning the mess the others made. At the time, she thought nothing of it. Now that phrase echoed ominously. The logbooks confirmed he had removed evidence from at least 4 missing person cases, all young women, all within 2 miles of his precinct. The missing evidence was never returned. The district attorney's office ordered a re-examination of Doyle's entire career. What they found blurred the line between protector and predator. He had volunteered for night patrols in areas where assaults were frequent, insisted on interviewing female witnesses alone, and was often the first to arrive at scenes of reported disturbances. Some victims, later recovered alive, described their assailant as wearing a badge, but fear kept them from testifying. In 1978, that fear was enough to silence them. In 2023, it was evidence. When confronted with these revelations, former colleagues spoke in half-truths. Some claimed they'd suspected something, but lacked proof. Others said they admired him too much to see the pattern. A few insisted he'd been framed, unwilling to accept that the man they once trusted could harbor such darkness. Meanwhile, Ellen Ward's mother, now 91, gave her first public interview. Sitting in her small Queens apartment surrounded by her daughter's sketches, she told a reporter, "They said time heals, but time only hides things. The truth was always there. They just didn't want to see it." Her words became the emotional headline of the week. Yet beneath all the revelations, one enigma remained unsolved. Where were the bodies? Divers returned to the lake and dredged the muddy floor for days. They found nothing except old bottles and fish bones. A forensic anthropologist proposed another theory. Doyle might have used abandoned construction sites near the East River, where foundations were poured over in the early 80s. Excavations began, uncovering fragments of fabric and bone too degraded for identification. Still, DNA analysis hinted at multiple victims. The press called it the concrete graveyard. By spring, the cold case that had started with a single photograph had become a citywide reckoning. The police commissioner resigned. Lawsuits were filed. The cold case unit doubled its staff. And yet, for every answer uncovered, more shadows appeared. Lieutenant Torres found herself haunted by Doyle's final words. She wouldn't stop screaming. Was it guilt? Justification? A warning? She played the interrogation footage repeatedly, searching for meaning in his expression. The twitch of a smile, the hollow calm in his eyes. One evening, as she stared at the paused video, she noticed something she hadn't before, a reflection in the glass partition behind him. A photograph pinned to the wall. It wasn't Ellen. It was another woman, unidentified. When analysts enhanced the image, they realized it matched one of the blurred figures from Doyle's undeveloped film. And in her hand, she held a necklace identical to the one found in the lake trunk, engraved with the initials TR. The name of the missing patrolman returned like an echo. Thomas Riley, the officer who'd vanished after filing that suspicious patrol log. Could Doyle's crimes have reached inside the force itself? The answer, buried under decades of silence, waited in the next unopened box from the evidence room. A box marked simply, Riley, 1980. The box labeled Riley in 1980 had been buried deep in the evidence warehouse, sealed with brittle tape and covered in layers of dust. No one remembered authorizing its storage. When Lieutenant Torres pried it open, the smell of mildew and old paper filled the air. Inside were fragments of a police uniform, a cracked leather badge wallet, and a single cassette tape wrapped in plastic. The label read, May 4th, 1980, personal. The tape was warped, the ink faded, but the handwriting matched that of Thomas Riley, the patrolman who'd vanished without trace. The tech team restored the audio in fragments. Static hissed, then a man's voice emerged, tense, hurried, whispering as if he feared being overheard. "If you're hearing this, something went wrong," he said. "It's Doyle. He's not who you think. I saw what he did. The girl from Houston Street. He said she slipped, but I saw blood. He told me to forget it, said he'd take care of things." Then silence, a chair scraping, and one last line. "They'll come for me next." That recording changed everything. For the first time, there was a witness from inside the force, and he had known. The cold case unit cross-checked the date on the tape. It matched the day Riley's resignation letter was filed. The letter itself had been typed on precinct stationery, brief and formal. But forensic analysis showed the signature was forged. Whoever submitted that resignation wanted him erased. The next step was to trace Riley's last movements. In 1980, he'd rented a small room above a pawn shop on Delancey Street. The building was demolished years ago, replaced by a parking structure, yet a clerk from the old shop was still alive, now 87 and living in New Jersey. When contacted, she remembered him clearly. "Quiet boy," she said, "always nervous. Used to sit in his car across the street before coming in. One night he showed up shaking, sold a wristwatch, said he was leaving town. But I knew he'd never get far. He looked scared of something bigger than himself." Investigators retrieved the pawn records from microfilm archives. The wristwatch had a serial number. It was standard police issue, awarded after 2 years of service. The same kind Doyle had worn in every photograph from the 1970s. Forensic accountants traced a payment made to Riley's account 2 days before his disappearance. $5,000 transferred from an unlisted municipal fund. It was signed off by a precinct administrator who had worked directly under Doyle. That administrator, John McKenna, died in 1985 in what was ruled a car accident. But now the autopsy report seemed incomplete. No toxicology, no follow-up, just a line that read, "Deceased at scene." Lieutenant Torres and her team started to suspect something deeper. Not a lone killer, but a system of quiet complicity. A network that buried its own. The idea was unthinkable, yet every document pointed toward it. The department in the late 1970s had been chaotic. Corruption, drug scandals, officers moonlighting for private security, informants vanishing. Doyle had thrived in that chaos. Riley, young and idealistic, must have seen something he shouldn't have. The missing patrolman's mother was still alive, 93, and living in a care home. When detectives visited, she produced a faded letter she'd kept for decades, postmarked May 6, 1980, 2 days after the tape's recording. The handwriting was shaky, panicked. "Mom, I'm sorry," it read. "Don't trust anyone from the department. If anything happens, look in the locker." She never understood what he meant. The locker had long been cleared, its contents discarded. But inventory logs from that year revealed an anomaly. One unclaimed item listed under his name, a metal box containing personal effects, transferred to off-site storage. When the storage facility was finally located in the Bronx, half the records had been water damaged, but among the salvaged boxes, one still bore his name. Inside was a stack of photographs and a small notebook. The photos were of alleys, apartment doors, and women, all victims of unsolved disappearances between 1977 and 1980. The notebook's first page contained an address scrawled in pencil, Warehouse 47, Pier 32. That pier had been demolished in 1981 after a fire, but city blueprints showed it had contained a police impound section, a temporary evidence facility supervised by none other than Sergeant Richard Doyle. The deeper they went, the more the lines blurred between law and crime. Torres walked the empty shoreline of what had once been Pier 32, now a sleek waterfront park. She imagined the creak of old wood under boots, the sound of waves muffling screams. Underneath her feet, beneath layers of concrete and time, could lie the truth that had eluded the city for 4 decades. In February 2023, ground-penetrating radar scans revealed irregular cavities beneath the foundations. When excavations began, they found fragments of uniform buttons, metallic objects, and human remains. 6 partial skeletons in varying stages of decay. DNA confirmed one of them was Thomas Riley. The others were still unidentified. Each body had been wrapped in industrial tarp, consistent with NYPD evidence coverings from the 1970s. The discovery hit the department like a tidal wave. A press conference was called, somber and short. "We are confronting one of the darkest chapters in our city's history," the commissioner said. "A betrayal not only of the badge, but of trust itself." As forensic teams cataloged every bone and scrap, a pattern emerged. Each victim bore ligature marks on the wrists. Traces of adhesive were found on clothing, similar to tape used in evidence sealing. Doyle hadn't just killed to silence, he'd killed using the very tools of his trade. In a storage trunk near the remains, they found a camera, a vintage Polaroid SX70, corroded but intact. When specialists recovered the film inside, one image stood out. A man in uniform shaking hands with a superior officer during a ceremony. Behind them, in the blurred background, a woman's silhouette stood near the door watching. Comparing faces, analysts realized it wasn't Doyle this time. It was another man. Officer John McKenna, the same administrator who'd died in a car accident. If McKenna had been there, if he'd known about the warehouse, his death might not have been accidental at all. The autopsy file was reopened. Forensic reevaluation of the old photos revealed bruising on his neck inconsistent with a crash. Someone had staged it. What once looked like the unraveling of one man's guilt was mutating into something systemic, a hidden rot that had festered beneath the surface of authority. Doyle might have been the trigger, but not the origin. Reporters called it the Brotherhood Shadow. Editorials questioned how many other cold cases could be linked to this buried conspiracy. Some even speculated that Doyle's sudden stroke in custody had been convenient, that someone, somewhere, didn't want him to talk. The district attorney neither confirmed nor denied it. Inside the cold case unit, Lieutenant Torres grew increasingly isolated. She stopped speaking to the press, kept her blinds closed, and began carrying her service weapon off duty. Colleagues noticed her obsession deepening. She pinned every new clue on a board that filled the entire wall, threads connecting faces, places, timelines. In the middle was a single Polaroid, Ellen Ward's, surrounded by red string that led to all the others. One night, while reviewing Doyle's personal notes recovered from his cottage, she found a line she'd overlooked. Pier 32 cleansed, the others buried deeper. The phrase suggested there were more victims, maybe in other boroughs, maybe under structures long rebuilt. When the team cross-referenced construction records, they noticed that Doyle had taken private security jobs with contractors during his final years on the force, all tied to redevelopment zones along the river, the same zones now too contaminated or dense to excavate. The haunting truth settled like dust. Parts of the city itself might be built over his crimes. As winter faded, a quiet dread replaced the initial shock. Ellen Ward's case had opened the door, but behind it was an entire chamber of horrors. Every headline that once read "Cold Case Solved" now felt premature. The files were thicker than ever, and each discovery only led to darker corridors. Late one evening, Torres received an unmarked envelope slid under her office door. Inside was a single Polaroid, newly printed, not aged or faded. It showed her standing outside the precinct that morning, looking at her phone. On the back, written in the same looping handwriting found on Ellen's photograph, were two words, "Still watching." She stared at it for a long time, her reflection mirrored in the plastic. Somewhere out there, someone else was alive. Someone who had learned from Doyle, or perhaps had guided him. The nightmare hadn't ended. It had evolved. The photograph slid under Lieutenant Torres' door marked a turning point. Until that moment, the investigation had been about the past. Dusty boxes, corroded evidence, the dead. Now it felt alive again, watching. The handwriting on the back matched the style used by Doyle, down to the slant of the looped T, but the ink was fresh, the film new. Someone had access to materials that should have been locked in evidence. Someone inside. Security footage from the precinct corridor was missing 7 minutes from the night before. The digital file simply cut to black, then resumed. IT specialists confirmed no external breach. The deletion had been executed from an authorized terminal. Torres ordered an internal review, but it yielded nothing except discomfort. Every officer in her unit suddenly aware that any of them could have done it. Meanwhile, the press refused to let go. Headlines screamed about the Brotherhood Shadow. Talk shows dissected the moral collapse of the 70s police force. Victims' families demanded new excavations. For the first time in decades, public trust in the NYPD dropped below 50%. Anonymous calls flooded hotlines, citizens claiming to know where bodies were buried, former officers confessing to minor cover-ups, cranks mixing truth and fantasy. Out of the noise, one message stood out. A man identifying himself only as the archivist left a voicemail for the cold case unit. His voice was hoarse, deliberate. "You're digging in the wrong pier," he said. "Doyle was never the first. Look at the benevolent order files, 1973, the private lodge. They called it the Keepers. He was recruited." The call ended before Trace could lock on. The Benevolent Order of Police Keepers had once been a social club, long defunct. Its members were senior officers known for weekend retreats upstate, hunting, target practice, ritual dinners. Records were scarce, but among Doyle's recovered papers was a membership card embossed with the order's crest, a sword over an open eye. Below, a Latin phrase, custodita ipsum, guard thyself. Torres brought the lead to her superiors. They told her to stand down, said the lodge had nothing to do with criminal activity. Old men playing secret society, one deputy commissioner scoffed. But that night an email appeared in Torres's inbox with no sender, containing a single scanned document. Minutes from a 1974 meeting at the Order's Lodge. One name circled in red, Richard Doyle. Another beside it, Captain Francis Heller, Doyle's commanding officer at the 9th Precinct, now 90 and living in assisted care. When interviewed, Heller's memory flickered between lucidity and confusion, yet when Torres showed him the Order's crest, his pupils shrank. "You don't understand," he whispered. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. It was cleansing, that's what they called it, to protect the city from corruption. Doyle believed he was chosen." He reached for her sleeve. "Don't open the vault, they'll make you disappear like the rest." Moments later, he began seizing. Paramedics rushed him to intensive care. He died before dawn. The word vault became the next obsession. Searching through property ledgers, Torres found that the Order had owned a small building near Battery Park, registered as Custody Holdings, LLC. The property had been transferred to the city in 1982 and converted into a utilities substation. Blueprints showed an unused basement sealed off after a gas leak in 1984. Permission for excavation required layers of bureaucracy, but a quiet warrant was signed under the guise of infrastructure safety. At 3 a.m. on a rain-soaked March morning, the cold case unit descended into the substation with hard hats and floodlights. Beneath concrete panels, they found an iron door welded shut. The metal bore faint engraving, the same sword and eye symbol. Cutting torches hissed, sparks falling like orange rain. When the door finally opened, the smell that escaped was earthy, chemical, ancient. Inside, rows of wooden shelves lined the walls, stacked with evidence boxes stamped with obsolete precinct seals. On one shelf sat a row of Polaroid cameras, each labeled with a year. 1976, 1977, 1978. Next to them were dozens of tapes, reel to reel, tagged with initials. Analysts spent days cataloging the material. What they uncovered defied reason. The reels contained recordings of initiation sessions held by members of the Order, masked voices discussing discipline, purification, the sacrifice of those who defy the badge. No explicit mention of murder, yet the language dripped with menace. On one tape dated April 1978, a voice unmistakably belonging to Doyle spoke. She was chosen because she mocked the uniform. The city must learn fear again. Publicly, the department released nothing. Official statements cited archival misinterpretation, but leaks are inevitable. Within weeks, fragments of the audio surfaced online. Hashtags demanded the full tapes. Conspiracy forums erupted. The narrative shifted from one rogue officer to a cult embedded within the police hierarchy. Protesters filled the streets around one police plaza, candles flickering like a vigil for the unseen. Inside headquarters, tension reached breaking point. Torres' superiors questioned her methods, hinted at suspension. Files she'd secured vanished from evidence logs. A forensic analyst who worked on the vault tapes was found dead in her apartment. Carbon monoxide leak, the report said. Friends called it suicide. Others didn't believe it. Torres began noticing a black sedan parked opposite her apartment each night, always empty, engine off. Calls to internal affairs went unanswered. She stopped sleeping, kept a recorder on her nightstand. Her narration and personal logs turned from factual to haunted. "We've crossed into something that feeds on silence," she said in one entry. "Every truth drags another ghost with it." Meanwhile, journalists uncovered financial ties between the Order and construction firms that had built several police facilities. Those same firms had hired Doyle for security consultation after his retirement. The implication was clear. The network hadn't died. It had adapted, embedding itself into legitimate contracts. The phrase, "the Brotherhood shadow," no longer sounded like metaphor. Then came another shock. During routine scanning of Doyle's undeveloped negatives, technicians discovered one image unlike the rest. It showed a group of men in uniform standing around a table. At the center lay an unidentifiable object wrapped in cloth. Behind them hung a banner with the Order's crest. In the corner of the frame, partly obscured, was a woman's silhouette. When enhanced, the facial structure matched Lieutenant Marcy Torres. But the photo was dated 1979. The official explanation was that the resemblance was coincidental, a trick of shadows and distortion. Yet for Torres, the image became an obsession. Who was the woman? A victim, a messenger, or a warning fabricated to break her resolve? She requested forensic age regression to compare features. It matched 87%, not enough for certainty, too much to dismiss. Colleagues whispered she was unraveling. The city, too, was unraveling. A documentary crew released leaked excerpts from the vault recordings. One clip featured Doyle quoting scripture while another voice, older, gravelly, spoke of the harvest. Internet sleuths identified that voice as belonging to a retired chaplain once assigned to the NYPD. The revelation forced the department to open a federal inquiry. Subpoenas flew across decades of bureaucracy. Yet even as investigators chased paperwork, something colder persisted, the sense that the order's remnants were still alive. Anonymous letters arrived at newsrooms signed CTI, the initials of the motto Custodi Te Ipsum. Each letter contained details only an insider could know. Badge numbers, dates, names of long-dead officers. One warned, "You cannot prosecute faith." By summer 2023, the cold case unit worked out of a secured basement, access limited to a handful of personnel. The walls were bare, the windows boarded. Torres hardly left the building. She spoke little, subsisting on coffee and silence. Her reports grew shorter, more precise, more chilling. Pattern confirmed, not isolated. Doctrine of purification, operational 1972-1981. Estimated victims 23. Still, the public demanded closure. The mayor held another press conference, promising transparency. Cameras flashed as he assured citizens the nightmare was contained. Behind him, Torres watched from the crowd, her face expressionless. She knew containment was a lie. The vault had revealed only what time had failed to bury. That night, when she returned to her office, another envelope awaited her on the desk. Inside, a single Polaroid, color this time. A group of uniformed officers standing in a modern precinct hallway. At the center, a young detective holding a camera, smiling. On the back, written in fresh blue ink, 4 words: "The order never ends." She turned off the lights, the city hum vibrating through the glass, and finally understood that the case was no longer about Ellen Ward or Doyle or even 1978. It was about inheritance, the passing down of corruption like a family heirloom, polished, disguised, never destroyed. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, echoing against the river where Pier 32 once stood. The same sound that had haunted the city for half a century, now folded back on itself, closing the loop. The morning the federal subpoenas arrived, New York woke to headlines that no one could ignore. Justice Department takes over cold case investigation. Dozens of officers named. Overnight, the Doyle file had expanded into a federal inquiry. Agents from the Bureau and the Department of Justice flooded the old precinct archives, carrying scanners, gloves, and sealed briefcases. Reporters filled the sidewalks outside headquarters, camera crews broadcasting live as unmarked vans came and went. The air around one police plaza crackled with tension, part fear, part relief that the truth might finally surface. Inside the cold case unit, Lieutenant Torres watched as federal agents dismantled what had been her life's work. Stacks of files were tagged as evidence, boxed, and driven away to Washington. Her board of photographs in red string was ordered removed. The new task force chief, Special Agent Cole Harriman, briefed the press in clipped sentences. "We are pursuing credible evidence of organized misconduct within law enforcement dating back 5 decades, he said. No individual, past or present, is above review. His tone was calm, but behind his words lay chaos. One of the first discoveries came from the order's financial ledgers. Forensic accountants uncovered millions in undeclared assets funneled through front charities during the 1970s and 1980s, funds earmarked for community programs that never existed. The paper trail led to shell companies registered in Delaware and Panama. At least 3 former officers, now living abroad, had signed those accounts. One, retired Captain Gerald Lowe, was arrested in Lisbon after an Interpol notice. In custody, he claimed diplomatic immunity through a private security consultancy tied to the U.S. government. When asked about Doyle, he smirked. "You think he acted alone? He was just a blade. Someone else held the handle." The investigation widened beyond New York. Similar benevolent orders appeared in records from Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles, each defunct, each with overlapping membership lists. The pattern was unmistakable. What began as a city scandal had become a national question. How deep did the corruption go, and how long had it been hidden behind the shield of brotherhood? In early May 2023, a confidential memo leaked to the Times. It listed 10 names of still living officers under investigation. 4 of them were high-ranking consultants for private defense firms. 2 had served as advisors for police reform committees in the 1990s. 1, astonishingly, sat on the board of a major civil rights foundation. The revelation triggered outrage. Editorials demanded resignations. Protesters gathered outside their offices, holding signs reading, "Who watches the watchman?" and "No more silent badges." Torres, meanwhile, found herself sidelined. Her authority on the case was officially suspended pending federal coordination. She was told to take mandatory leave. Instead, she kept working unofficially, reviewing case files from home, cross-referencing timelines the federal team had missed. Her notes revealed a detail no one else had noticed. Every order-connected precinct had experienced unsolved disappearances within 1 year of its founding. The pattern was mathematical, almost ritualistic, an initiation by silence. The Bureau's data analysts corroborated her findings. They called it the cycle pattern. Between 1972 and 1981, at least 23 individuals, mostly women, some transient, some connected to officers, had vanished near precinct jurisdictions with confirmed order members. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit described it as systemic predation enabled by institutional hierarchy. In plain terms, murder disguised as procedure. When this leaked to the press, the backlash was immediate. Cable networks ran constant coverage, playing eerie montages of Doyle's mugshot, old precinct photos, and slow pans over the vault's recovered Polaroids. Former mayors were interviewed. Retired detectives argued on live television about whether such evil could exist unnoticed. Across social media, users shared photos of missing relatives from the era, asking if their names might be on the list. Then came the moment that shifted the narrative again. During forensic restoration of the Order's vault tapes, analysts recovered a partial voice print from the 1974 recordings. It matched a man who was still alive, Deputy Commissioner Harold Keene, a revered figure in New York policing, often celebrated for cleaning up corruption in the 1990s. When confronted, Keene denied everything. "If that's my voice, it's been tampered with," he told reporters. But the damage was irreversible. The face once associated with reform was now linked to the rot itself. The city council convened emergency hearings broadcast live. Torres was subpoenaed to testify. Dressed in plain black, she walked into the chamber like a ghost, carrying the weight of decades. Cameras flashed. She described the discoveries, the vault, the recordings, the missing officer Riley, the human remains beneath Pier 32. Her voice was steady but cold. "The truth was never buried," she said. "It was filed away." When asked if she believed the order still existed, she replied, "It never needed to. The system learned its language." The room fell silent. Public reaction was seismic. Federal raids followed in multiple states. Homes of retired officers were searched. Hidden rooms and memorabilia were found. Old badges, Polaroids, tapes. In Philadelphia, agents discovered a chest nearly identical to the one pulled from Doyle's Lake, containing items labeled Ceremony 1975. The pattern confirmed itself. This was no isolated cult, but a network operating under the guise of fraternity. As the investigation spread, new whistleblowers emerged. A retired dispatcher revealed she'd been instructed to erase certain radio logs in the 70s. A coroner admitted to falsifying death certificates under pressure. One anonymous letter sent to the Bureau read, "We thought we were protecting the force. We didn't know we were protecting a killer." By June, arrests reached 12. Yet, for every door opened, another shut. Evidence vanished from federal archives. Witnesses retracted statements. One agent on the task force died in what was described as a freak household accident. Inside the Bureau, whispers of internal sabotage grew louder. The phrase "blue wall" took on a darker meaning, less about solidarity, more about containment. The federal task force began publishing sanitized updates. Investigation ongoing, new evidence under review, no public risk. But independent journalists pushed deeper. One of them, Laura Greer from the Ledger, received a USB drive from an unknown source. It contained footage of a 1980 order meeting, grainy, silent, filmed through a crack in a door. Doyle sat at a table beside Keene and Lowe. On the table lay what appeared to be police files. Greer released the footage online. Within hours, it went viral. Under mounting pressure, Congress opened a formal inquiry. The hearing stretched late into the night, broadcast live nationwide. Senators grilled officials on how a network of officers had managed to operate unchecked for decades. One exchange became historic. "How many cold cases remain unsolved because of internal interference?" a senator asked. The answer came from a weary analyst. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. We just stopped counting." For the first time in 50 years, the public saw the cost of silence quantified. Memorials were organized for the unnamed victims. The city of New York reopened a section of East Houston Street, renaming it Ellen Ward Way. The mural of her face became a pilgrimage site for those seeking justice. Candles burned nightly. Through it all, Torres watched from a distance. She'd become both hero and pariah, admired for exposing the truth, resented for dismantling what others still called legacy. Federal agents continued their work, but she no longer trusted them. Too many coincidences, too many disappearances. One night she received a message on her secure phone. No caller ID, no traceable signal, just a voice. Older, confident, calm. "You've done your part," it said. But some truths keep the city standing. Let the dead lie. Then silence. The call was never logged. The number never existed. Weeks later, as hearings concluded, Special Agent Harriman announced the preliminary findings. 41 confirmed victims across 4 states, 17 officers implicated, 8 dead before prosecution. "We cannot undo what was done," he said, "but we can expose what was hidden." The cameras caught him pausing, glancing down at his notes, before adding, "The order's operations ceased by 1982. It was meant as closure, but Torres knew it wasn't true." 2 days after the announcement, a maintenance worker at the Brooklyn Evidence Facility found something lodged behind an old ventilation panel, a Polaroid camera recently used. Inside the film cartridge, one photograph, a woman walking through a courthouse hallway, file in hand, unaware she was being watched. The timestamp on the photo was from that morning. The woman was Lieutenant Marcy Torres. The evidence log labeled it unverified threat. The Bureau called it a prank, but for those who had followed the case since the beginning, it was déjà vu. History repeating through the click of a shutter. Outside, under the neon glow of the city, sirens once again rose and fell like breathing. The story had grown beyond Doyle, beyond 1978, beyond New York. It had become something larger, an anatomy of power, silence, and the things buried under uniform blue. And as the night stretched over the skyline, the truth remained unresolved, waiting in archives and alleyways, whispering through the static of forgotten tapes, daring someone else to listen. When the hearings ended, New York fell into a strange silence. The crowds outside one police plaza dispersed, the cameras packed away, and for the first time in months, the city's nightly news opened without mentioning the order. But beneath the surface, the damage lingered. The justice system was fractured, the Bureau's task force disbanded quietly, replaced by a review committee that promised transparency yet held every meeting behind closed doors. Files disappeared, whistleblowers recanted. The narrative began to shift from outrage to fatigue. The story, once burning hot, cooled into something uncomfortably familiar, a tragedy absorbed by bureaucracy. Lieutenant Marcy Torres returned to work in name only. Her office had been moved to a smaller space on the 6th floor, stripped of her board, her files, her authority. She was technically reassigned to consultative oversight, a title that meant nothing. When she arrived, her new desk was bare except for a manila envelope stamped archival compliance. Inside, a list of cases to close out, all minor, lost property, petty thefts, procedural audits. It was a message. The system had survived, and she had been absorbed by it. Outside, spring crept over the city. The mural of Ellen Ward on East Houston bloomed with flowers again, candles replaced by fresh paint. Tourists took photos. For them, the story was finished. The monster exposed, the victims named, justice declared. But Torres couldn't feel closure. Every time she saw the mural, she thought of the Polaroid from the evidence room, the one showing her own figure walking through a courthouse hallway. The film had been modern, the ink fresh. Somewhere someone still had the camera. She began walking the city alone at night, retracing the route Ellen had taken that final evening in 1978, from the cafe to the subway grate to the steps of the old synagogue where the sketchbook had been found. The streets had changed, yet the shadows felt the same. Steam still rose from the vents, lights still flickered through alleyways, and the air still carried that uneasy hum of lives crossing unseen. Sometimes she caught herself glancing at windows, half expecting a flash, a click, the faint mechanical breath of a Polaroid shutter. At the same time, strange things began happening inside the department. Evidence lockers were re-inventoried and found missing key items. The original tape from Riley's recording, Doyle's revolver, the Polaroid labeled "She Said No." Gone. Official memos claimed reclassification for federal custody, yet no paper trail led there. Torres confronted Harriman, now back in Washington, but his line was disconnected. Emails bounced back, his name vanished from the Bureau's directory within weeks. It was as if he'd never existed. In July, an anonymous file was mailed to Torres's apartment. No return address. Inside was a single flash drive containing digital scans of documents marked, "Do not duplicate." One file caught her attention. Operation Blue Hour, Strategic Debrief, 1982. It was stamped with the same insignia found on the order's vault, the sword and open eye. The report described post-incident containment protocols following phase cleansing. The language was bureaucratic but chilling. It mentioned a continuity division formed to protect historical assets within law enforcement culture. At the bottom of the page, a signature, H. Keene, the man who had denied everything on camera. Torres printed the pages and read them under a desk lamp until dawn. The phrasing suggested something larger than the order, a government-sanctioned effort to preserve it under another name. She remembered the warning call she'd received weeks earlier. Some truths keep the city standing. Now it made sense. If the order had truly been woven into institutional hierarchy, dismantling it might have risked unraveling the system itself. Justice had limits. Beyond them lay stability, the lie society chose to protect itself. Her insomnia returned. She began recording her thoughts just as Riley once had. Her voice, low and steady, filled the empty apartment. They say corruption ends when exposed, she said. But corruption isn't a man or a lodge. It's the silence between one truth and the next. In August, one of the last surviving order members, Captain Gerald Lowe, agreed to a plea bargain in exchange for testimony. During the closed session, he spoke slowly, his voice hollow from medication. "We weren't killers," he said. "We were believers. We thought we were defending the city from decay. Every generation needs a cleansing." When asked who gave the command, he smiled faintly. No one. The order was just the mirror. The reflection came from above. He refused to elaborate. The transcript was sealed. News coverage dwindled. Public outrage turned to resignation. Pundits began reframing the narrative. The scandal as a historic anomaly, the system's lesson in reform. Documentaries were pitched, books announced, the public moved on. But inside the cold case unit, the silence deepened. Torres noticed subtle changes, a new lock on her office door, unfamiliar faces in the hallway, small delays in her paycheck. One evening, she found her computer wiped clean. It claimed a syncing error. That same night, she received a call from an unlisted number. The voice was female, calm, unfamiliar. "You should stop looking," it said. "He didn't work alone." Then a click. The next day, Torres requested surveillance footage from the substation vault excavation, hoping to review the original evidence chain. The footage was gone. When she asked the clerk, he stared blankly and said, "We don't have clearance for that project anymore." She checked the federal database. The entire case file had been recoded under a new classification, Public Integrity Preservation Initiative, access restricted. In desperation, she turned to Laura Greer, the investigative journalist who'd leaked the 1980 footage. They met in a dim cafe near the Brooklyn waterfront, the same kind of place Ellen Ward might once have sketched in. Greer looked exhausted. "You're not the only one they're cleaning up after," she said. "3 of my sources are missing. One turned up in Florida under a new identity. The others, nothing." She slid a photo across the table, a grainy shot of 2 men in suits leaving a courthouse basement door. "Federal," she whispered. "Same briefcases they used for Doyle's files." That night, Torres went home through the rain. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she noticed her door slightly open. Inside, the lights were off. She drew her weapon, entered quietly. On her kitchen table sat a Polaroid camera. Next to it, a single photo developing face down. She turned it over. The image showed the mural of Ellen Ward. But now, someone had painted a fresh layer over it, a new word across her face in dripping black paint: forgiven. No fingerprints, no footprints, no witnesses. The forensics team logged it, but the report never appeared in records. Torres began to wonder if she'd been left alive as a message or a placeholder. Weeks passed. The mural was cleaned, the word erased, the city resumed its rhythm. A memorial for all confirmed victims was held at Pier 32, now a quiet park overlooking the water. Families gathered, candles flickered in the wind, reporters stood at a respectful distance. Torres watched from the back, hands in her coat pockets. When the speeches ended, she walked to the edge of the pier and looked down at the dark water. Somewhere beneath her feet lay the foundations of the old warehouse. The vaults, the bones, the silence. She realized the city had learned to build over its ghosts long ago. In her final recorded log of that year, she said only this: "The camera was never about memory. It was control. Whoever holds it decides what's seen and what disappears." No one ever determined who left the Polaroid in her apartment. No one reopened the missing evidence cases. The official narrative remained. Doyle acted alone. The order was dissolved. Justice was served. But sometimes, late at night, when the city hum quieted and the old pipes groaned, officers in the new precinct swore they heard the faint click of a camera echoing through the halls. One flash, one heartbeat, one reminder that some eyes never close. Autumn returned to New York carrying the smell of rain and metal. By then, Lieutenant Marcy Torres had learned to move like a shadow, careful, quiet, aware of eyes that followed. Her apartment phone rang at odd hours, always silent on the other end. Neighbors noticed men waiting in parked cars for hours, smoking, watching the building entrance. When she reported it, Internal Affairs said they found nothing. The reports vanished into the same void that had swallowed her files. Still, she couldn't stop. The flash drive she'd received, the one labeled Operation Blue Hour, haunted her. Every night she reread it, searching for hidden meaning. The report spoke of continuity divisions and cultural preservation within the command structure. It referenced an entity called Division 7, described only as a psychological stabilization unit formed after civil unrest in the late 60s. The language was sterile, bureaucratic, but the implications were clear. The order wasn't born from chaos, it was designed. To trace its origin, Torres went to the city archives in Lower Manhattan, a subterranean labyrinth of concrete and flickering lights. The clerk on duty hesitated when she mentioned Division 7. "You'll need federal clearance for that," he said. She showed her badge. "It's local jurisdiction," she replied. After a pause, he led her through a corridor to a restricted wing sealed behind metal shutters. The air was heavy with dust. Folders lined the shelves, yellowed with age. On one spine, faded ink read Blue Hour, Initiation, 1959 to 1970. She opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, black and white images of uniformed men standing in formation inside a dim hall. At the center, a younger version of Deputy Commissioner Keene, smiling stiffly. Next to him, another familiar face, Richard Doyle, not yet 30, already wearing the badge. Behind them hung a banner with the same sword and eye emblem. A typed memorandum lay beneath the photos. Subject: Officer Behavioral Conditioning Project Blue Hour. Objective: mitigate officer attrition through exposure therapy and ritual reinforcement of duty identity. The text continued, clinical and detached. Test subjects to undergo simulation scenarios invoking guilt, fear, and moral transgression, followed by symbolic cleansing to reinforce loyalty. At the bottom was a signature: Dr. Alan S. Vance, Psych Services Division, 1960. Torres had heard that name once before, in an old training manual footnote citing Dr. A. Vance, behavioral consultant. She searched the database. Vance had died in 1974 under mysterious circumstances. His personnel file had been sealed for national security reasons. Back at her apartment, Torres compiled the fragments. Blue Hour had been an official program, a psychological experiment designed to create officers immune to emotional fatigue. But something had gone wrong. Ritual reinforcement had turned literal. The men had found meaning in the cleansing, and meaning had become faith. Doyle hadn't corrupted the order had corrupted him. Days later, Torres received an unmarked envelope slipped under her door. Inside were 3 old photographs. The first showed the same lodge found in the vault, only newer, pristine. The second captured a group of officers in civilian clothes holding lanterns by a lakeshore. The third froze a ritual moment, a wooden effigy burning while uniformed silhouettes stood around it. On the back of the final photo, someone had written, "First Harvest, 1961. No fingerprints, no return address, only a postmark from Albany." She drove north that night. The road wound through dark forest and fog until she reached the edge of a desolate lake, the same one from the photograph. The lodge was gone, replaced by new cabins and a gravel parking lot. She parked near the water and waited, listening. The wind moved through the pines with the sound of whispers. A ranger eventually emerged from the main cabin, startled to see her. When she showed her badge and asked about old police property, his face changed. "We still find things sometimes," he said quietly. "Bad things. Chains, burned metal, once bones." Torres requested access to the maintenance records. He hesitated, then led her to a shed. Inside, boxes of recovered debris sat under tarps, rusted tools, fragments of uniforms, a brass nameplate reading Keene. Among the pile was a small tin container sealed with tape. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a reel of film labeled Blue Hour, 1962 ceremony. She borrowed a portable projector from the ranger's office and set it up inside the cabin. The footage was grainy, silent. Men in uniform stood in a circle around a wooden structure, faces illuminated by torchlight. At the center was a young woman in civilian clothes, blindfolded, standing motionless. One man stepped forward, Doyle. He raised a badge to her forehead. The crowd saluted, then the film cut abruptly. Torres sat frozen as the projector rattled to a stop. The implication was monstrous. Blue Hour hadn't been psychological conditioning, it had been initiation through violence, and the purification Doyle later described had been practiced long before Ellen Ward's murder. She took photos of the film frames and drove back to the city before dawn. By midday, the files were already gone from her car trunk. Someone had broken in without triggering the alarm. Her laptop was wiped. Only one copy remained, the images she'd emailed to herself using an encrypted account. She went to Greer again, the journalist. They met in a crowded diner this time, pretending not to know each other. Torres slid a napkin across the table with the address of the lake. "It started there," she whispered. "Get someone you trust." Greer nodded but looked terrified. "You think they'll let me print this?" she asked. "They let the last story run because it served their cleanup. This one burns the whole system." 2 days later, Greer's apartment caught fire. The official report called it faulty wiring. Her remains were never identified with certainty. The tragedy barely made the news. The media had moved on to politics, storms, markets. The cold case was no longer trending, but inside the Bureau, a quiet war had begun. Files referencing Blue Hour were reclassified under national defense. Requests for access triggered alerts. Torres's security clearance was revoked. She was ordered to surrender her badge pending psychological evaluation. That night, she received another phone call. This time, the voice was male, calm, with the measured rhythm of someone reading a script. "Lieutenant Torres," it said, "you've done enough damage. The truth doesn't belong to the public. Let it rest." She said nothing. The line went dead. She left the city the next morning. Before leaving, she made one final stop. The old synagogue where Ellen Ward's sketchbook had been found 45 years earlier. The building was boarded up, ready for demolition. Inside, dust hung like fog. On the altar lay a small envelope, clean, untouched by time. It contained a single Polaroid, the same image of Ellen's sketchbook on those steps, but newly printed. On the back, in that familiar handwriting, were 3 words, "First of many." Torres stood in the empty hall until the light shifted through the stained glass, bathing the room in red. She realized then that Ellen Ward had never been random. She had been chosen, the first public act of a private creed that had started long before anyone called it murder. When she drove out of Manhattan that evening, the skyline shimmered in rain. She left her badge at the toll booth, placed gently beside the coins, and didn't look back. The city behind her kept breathing, indifferent, built on its foundations of silence. Later that night, in a motel off the interstate, she recorded one last note into her phone. "They think the story ends when the camera stops," she said, "but the lens never closes. It just waits for light." The recording ended. The file was never found. By the winter of 2024, the story of Lieutenant Marcy Torres had become another missing person statistic. Her badge number was retired quietly, her files sealed under voluntary resignation. Within the department, no one spoke her name aloud. But beyond the precinct walls, whispers survived. A few who had followed the Doyle case from the beginning sensed something unfinished. One of them was journalist David Rourke, a former crime correspondent for The Ledger, the same paper where Laura Greer had once worked. He'd read her stories, studied her notes, and remembered the fire that consumed her apartment. It didn't look like an accident. Rourke had spent years covering corruption, but the Blue Hour fragments disturbed him more than anything he'd seen. They felt radioactive, documents that burned anyone who touched them. When he requested access to the Federal Archive, he was told the files didn't exist, so he did what reporters do best, started from the edges, interviewing the forgotten. His first stop was the ranger station near the lake where Torres had found the 1962 reel. The new ranger didn't remember her, but the maintenance log still listed her name. "She asked about the old police property," the man said. "Funny thing, that week someone from the city came and cleared everything out. Trucks, men in suits, the whole lot. Said it was environmental cleanup." In the shed where the debris had once been stored, Rourke found only dust, but wedged under a broken floorboard was a scrap of film, brittle and faded. When he held it to the light, a single frame flickered, a burning effigy reflected in water. Back in the city, he tracked down a retired bureau clerk willing to talk off record. Over coffee in a Queens diner, she slid a note across the table. "Check facility Delta 13, Route 9A. Ask for box 3117. Then she left without another word. 2 days later, Rourke drove north under a gray sky. Delta 13 wasn't on any map. It turned out to be a decommissioned postal warehouse surrounded by barbed wire and cameras. He waited until night, found a side entrance pried open by time, and slipped inside. Rows of metal shelving stretched into darkness. Dust motes floated through beams of weak light. On the 3rd row, he found it. Box 3117, sealed with wax, stamped Evidence, Cold Case Division. Inside were manila envelopes labeled Blue Hour, declassified drafts. The first document was a progress report dated 1965. It described positive reinforcement outcomes among participants who underwent Stage 3 integration exercises, adding that symbolic execution rituals yield measurable increase in cohesion. The next page was worse, a list of initials under the heading Voluntary Losses, Collateral Participants. Among them was E.W. Ellen Ward. The dates didn't align. Ellen had been killed in 1978, unless her name had been added later, retroactively classified as part of the experiment. The realization made his skin crawl. It meant that even her death, the murder that had started it all, had been absorbed into the mythology, repurposed as data for the system that birthed it. Rourke photographed everything, every page, every signature. Then he heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, not echoing from far, close. He turned off the flashlight and froze. A beam of white light swept across the aisle. 2 figures in black uniforms entered, their movements too disciplined to be security guards. They spoke quietly into earpieces. Rourke crouched behind a crate, heart hammering. One of them stopped near the shelf, his gloved hand brushing the dust on the box. "It's open," he said. "Someone's been here." Rourke waited until they moved deeper into the rows, then slipped toward the exit, clutching the camera to his chest. Outside, the night air felt sharp, electric. He drove until dawn, never once using the same road twice. 3 days later, the photos appeared anonymously on a private journalist forum. Within hours, they spread across encrypted networks. Someone reposted them on a dark web server under the title The Cleansing Files. Federal agencies moved fast, takedowns, arrests, threats, but the images had already escaped. The public saw only fragments, yet it was enough. Words like conditioning, rituals, and Division 7 ignited the internet. Old wounds reopened. Blue Hour was trending again. Rourke knew they would come for him, so he went underground, following Torres's last known route. He visited the boarded synagogue on East Houston, now a construction site. Beneath the scaffolding, someone had written a message in black spray paint: "The lens never closes." He recognized the phrase from Torres's final log. He knew then she'd been here, maybe even alive. He searched further. In the city morgue, he found no record of Torres's death, no missing person file either, but one clerk, nervous and sweating, mentioned a woman matching her description visiting 2 months earlier, asking to see unclaimed bodies from the 1970s. She'd signed the ledger with initials only, MT. The last page she viewed was a file tagged Case 421B, Jane Doe, recovered 1974 Hudson River. Rourke requested access. The coroner refused. "That one's federal," he said. "Chain of custody transferred years ago." Still, a copy of the old autopsy report survived. The notes described ligature marks, adhesive residue on the wrists, and a healed burn scar shaped like an emblem, a sword through an eye. Cause of death: drowning. The report listed her as unidentified, age approximately 25, but attached to the file was a grainy photo of the body. Rourke's breath caught. The woman looked like Ellen Ward. He showed the photo to a forensic imaging expert. After digital overlay, the match was conclusive. Ellen had been killed years before 1978. The case that defined the cold case unit had been built on a body misdated, relabeled, and resurrected to serve as a myth. Doyle hadn't chosen her. He'd been assigned her. The order's first real victim had been buried as an experiment, then reborn as propaganda for loyalty gone wrong. The 1978 headline had been a convenient lie to hide a 20-year trail of state-sanctioned conditioning. The revelation tore through him. It meant everything. Doyle, the vault, even Torres's investigation had been manipulated to conceal a deeper truth. The camera wasn't just a weapon, it was a mechanism of control. Blue Hour had manufactured both the crime and the confession. He needed proof. Only one person might still have it. Through old contacts, Rourke traced Dr. Vance's assistant, now living under another name in Maine. The man, frail and trembling, refused to speak at first, but when Rourke mentioned Torres, he sighed. "She came here too," he said. "They sent her the same message they sent me. Let it rest. She didn't listen." He handed over a box. Inside was a reel-to-reel tape labeled Vance Archive 02, Final Directive. The recording was faint, the voice academic but trembling. "They told us it would save lives," Vance said. "Conditioning officers to endure violence, to erase doubt. But we created zealots. We gave them ritual and they gave it meaning. Doyle was our proof of concept, the first who called it faith." He paused, coughing. "We buried the project in '74, but we never stopped watching." When the tape ended, Rourke sat in the dark, listening to the hiss of static. Then, faintly, another sound rose beneath it, the click of a camera shutter. He left Maine that night, driving without destination, knowing he was already being followed. Weeks later, a story appeared on an independent blog titled The Ward Sequence: Truth Behind Blue Hour. It contained excerpts from the documents, the real transcript, and a timeline of the manipulation. The article spread before being deleted, but the last paragraph lingered in cached form across the web. Ellen Ward never died in 1978. She died in 1974 under another name. The investigation that solved her case was built on falsified evidence to justify the reactivation of Division 7. Doyle was not the origin of the horror, he was its product. And Lieutenant Marcy Torres, if alive, is the last witness to a truth too dangerous to surface. After publication, Rourke vanished. His apartment was found empty, laptop crushed, camera missing. In his mailbox was a single envelope containing a Polaroid, a table in a dim room, 2 coffee cups, a folded newspaper. The headline visible on it read, "Blue Hour Files Leak. Government Denies Involvement." On the back, written in neat blue ink, 3 words: "You were right." No one ever confirmed who sent it. Some say Torres survived and sent it herself. Others believe the order, or whatever it had become, sent it as closure, their way of finishing the story. But somewhere, across underground servers and encrypted archives, copies of the Blue Hour documents remain. Each time they resurface, they vanish again. Each time someone reads them, another light flickers out. And yet, even buried, even redacted, the pattern endures. A city built on silence, a camera waiting in the dark, and the faint sound of a shutter clicking long after the film is gone. When the Blue Hour files leaked to the public, it took less than 48 hours for the world to fracture. The images, transcripts, and declassified fragments spread faster than governments could contain them. Journalists downloaded, re-uploaded, mirrored, encrypted. Every time one link vanished, 5 more appeared. News networks broke format. Anchors read the same headline in a dozen languages. Cold case conspiracy. Evidence suggests decades of orchestrated killings. Washington denied everything. The Justice Department called the documents fabricated. The Bureau labeled them foreign disinformation. But the metadata told another story. The files came from official internal servers. Timestamps authentic, signatures verified. The public didn't need confirmation. They could feel the truth pulsing behind the lies. Protests erupted in New York, London, Berlin. Candles and police tape lined the steps of courthouses. People carried cardboard signs with the same phrase, "The camera never closed." In Manhattan, Ellen Ward's mural was vandalized again, this time not in anger, but as warning. Someone had painted the sword and eye emblem across her image, dripping red. Within hours, workers covered it with white paint. By morning, the symbol reappeared. It became the mark of defiance, sprayed on walls, subway cars, riot shields, the emblem of what the media began calling the doctrine. Governments launched emergency inquiries. In the UK, Parliament demanded answers about similar conditioning programs run during the Cold War. In Germany, investigators reopened files tied to NATO psychological divisions. In Brazil, a journalist published documents referencing Operation Amanhecer Azul, literal translation, Blue Dawn. Everywhere, the same phrase repeated: ritual reinforcement, stabilization doctrine, behavioral loyalty. Within weeks, the Blue Hour scandal shifted from conspiracy theory to geopolitical crisis. The United Nations called for a joint investigation. Delegates cited the New York files as evidence of a covert transnational conditioning experiment conducted under the guise of law enforcement cooperation. The U.S. delegation walked out of the chamber. Inside the country, the backlash turned violent. Protests escalated into riots near police headquarters. Stations were firebombed. Retired officers went into hiding. Families of missing victims demanded exhumations. The mayor declared a state of emergency. And somewhere in the chaos, whispers returned about Marcy Torres, about the journalist David Rourke, about a final recording that might prove everything. It surfaced online 3 months later. A group of anonymous data archivists calling themselves the Reclaimers released a short audio clip less than 2 minutes long, the file name, Ward Sequence Transmission 001 Wave. The voice was unmistakably female, calm, low, deliberate. "This is Lieutenant Marcy Torres," it began. "If you're hearing this, I didn't make it back. The program never ended. It only changed form. Division 7 became Division 1. They rewrote the directive in 1991 under national security. They call it retention training now." Static crackled, then her breathing close to the mic. "You think the order died with Doyle? He was just proof it worked. The real success was silence. Every time a truth is buried, they mark it with a camera flash. The photo isn't for memory, it's for obedience. Look closely at any badge. There's a lens in it now." The clip ended with a faint sound. Analysts slowed it down, enhanced the waveform. It wasn't static, it was the click of a Polaroid shutter. Within hours, the file was scrubbed from all major platforms. Federal cyber divisions issued takedown orders citing audio forgery, but the damage was irreversible. Millions had already heard it, shared it, saved it. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Torres tape, #Blue Hour Truth, #Division 7. Some believed it was real. Others claimed it was AI generated. The uncertainty only made it stronger. International fallout deepened. Several allied governments suspended intelligence sharing agreements with the U.S. human rights organizations, filed petitions for access to the Blue Hour archives. The president gave a televised address denying any active division program and condemning acts of cyber terrorism intended to destabilize public trust. But his speech was interrupted halfway through when multiple television feeds glitched simultaneously. For 12 seconds, across hundreds of screens, a single image appeared. A still frame of Ellen Ward's face, overlaid with the words "first of many." The White House called it a hack, the networks called it a warning. Meanwhile, in New York, federal teams raided what remained of the cold case unit. The office was empty, computers wiped. One wall, freshly painted, still showed faint outlines of where Torres's board once hung. Beneath the paint, ultraviolet scanners revealed handwriting carved into the plaster. It read, "The dead will speak when you stop listening." By spring 2024, Blue Hour had become mythology. Documentaries, podcasts, leaked interviews, every medium tried to claim ownership of the truth. Yet the closer anyone looked, the more the details shifted. Witnesses vanished. Servers hosting files went offline. Experts who authenticated the documents retracted their statements or disappeared altogether. The world had entered a new phase of collective paranoia. Cameras were covered with tape. Protesters refused to be photographed. People destroyed old Polaroids. afraid of what might be hidden inside the frame. Then came the blackout. On May 3rd, every major broadcast signal in North America experienced a 12-minute interruption. When the feed returned, most stations reported technical failure, but several independent channels captured fragments, video without sound, showing what appeared to be an empty interrogation room. A single chair, a metal table, fluorescent lights humming. On the table lay a police badge, the number etched into it, 421B, Ellen Ward's original case file code. A week later, a decryption key appeared on multiple darknet forums. Those who used it claimed it unlocked a series of time-stamped images, a sequence documenting the original Blue Hour experiments from 1959 to 1981. Faces of officers, civilians, and victims. At the end of the sequence, one final image, a woman standing in a dim hallway, camera in hand. Her face partially obscured, but recognizable, Marcy Torres. Official agencies dismissed the sequence as a hoax, but independent experts analyzing the film grains confirmed its authenticity. Vintage Polaroid stock discontinued in 1982. The exposure time matched Torchlight. The metadata aligned with the same camera model recovered from Doyle's home decades earlier. The implication was chilling. Torres hadn't escaped the system. She had become part of it. Global outrage reached its peak. The United Nations opened hearings on psychological warfare within domestic law enforcement. Nations accused one another of participation. Financial markets trembled. Faith in institutions collapsed. A commentator on live television summed it up bluntly. The Blue Hour wasn't about loyalty. It was about control. And control doesn't die, it mutates. In New York, the mural of Ellen Ward was repainted one last time. This time, the artist replaced her eyes with two white circles, blank and unseeing. Beneath them, a line in crimson paint. We are all the experiment. That night, thunder rolled across the city, rattling the old windows of the 9th Precinct. Officers on duty later swore they saw a flash of light in the hallway, like an old camera going off. When they checked the corridor, nothing was there. Just an open door leading to the evidence room, its shelves bare except for a single Polaroid camera resting in the center of the floor. No fingerprints, no film inside, only a note taped to the lens, next frame waiting. The image of that camera, photographed by a rookie and leaked online, became the final icon of the Blue Hour era, a symbol of truth that couldn't be erased, of silence that couldn't be trusted. The story that began with Ellen Ward's disappearance in 1978 now spanned continents, decades, generations. What had started as a single unsolved murder had become an indictment of power itself. And yet, even as the world demanded closure, something in the air suggested it would never come. The order might have changed names, the files might have burned, but the eyes behind the lens were still open, somewhere unseen, capturing the next moment, the next witness, the next believer. Because in every system built on control, someone must hold the camera, and someone always does. 5 years after the Blue Hour leaks, the world looked calmer on the surface but felt colder underneath. The headlines had faded, the investigations dissolved into committees, and the public learned to live with unanswered questions. The word order was rarely spoken anymore. In schools, textbooks called it a moral breakdown of 20th century policing. Governments built museums to memory, not to justice. Cameras were still everywhere, only now they were smaller, smarter, hidden inside streetlights and uniforms. The same technology that once documented crimes was now rebranded as protection. People called it progress. Those who remembered called it repetition. New York was quieter too. The 9th Precinct, rebuilt and modernized, stood where the old one had been. Tourists took photos outside the new facade without realizing what had once happened there. The old evidence room had been converted into a training auditorium, its walls covered with slogans. Accountability, integrity, transparency. Yet sometimes, during power failures, cadets swore they heard a faint clicking sound echoing from the vents, like film advancing through an unseen camera. Maintenance blamed old wiring. In 2029, the government launched the Truth Commission on Behavioral Experiments. Its mission was reconciliation. Former officers testified through digital proxies, their faces blurred, voices altered. Each insisted they had been following orders they didn't understand. No one went to prison. The final report concluded that Blue Hour was the result of isolated psychological mismanagement and should not define the honor of those who serve. The families of the victims received compensation checks and signed non-disclosure agreements. The city moved on again. But memory has a way of surviving in static. Late that summer, a university research lab in Toronto received a box of obsolete storage drives from a defunct federal contractor. Among them was one labeled Custody Backup Plot 07. When the technicians decrypted it, they found an audio file time-stamped April 4, 2024, 2 weeks after the Torres transmission went public. The file's metadata listed the author as M. Torres. They assumed it was fake, another internet myth. But when they cleaned the noise and ran spectral analysis, the voice was unmistakable. If this survives, it means they failed to erase everything, she said. Blue Hour isn't a program anymore, it's a language. Every system learns to speak it eventually. Obedience disguised as order, silence disguised as peace. They call it security now. I call it inheritance. The recording lasted exactly 6 minutes. She described a place she called the mirror room, where walls were lined with screens, looping footage of every Blue Hour victim. They keep the images alive because forgetting kills belief, she said. Faith needs proof. The final minute of the tape was faint, words drowned by static and machinery. Then her voice softened. If you're listening, you already know it's still happening. They don't need the badge anymore. They have the lens. A pause, breath close to the mic. Look up, it's already watching. Then the same sound, the sharp mechanical snap of a shutter. The lab forwarded the file to authorities. Within 48 hours, agents seized the drives. But by then, the clip had spread through encrypted networks, stitched into videos, whispered across forums. For every version taken down, new ones appeared under different titles: Mirror Room Transmission, Ward Sequence 2, The Torres Testament. Meanwhile, small incidents began occurring across the city. Cameras malfunctioned simultaneously in multiple precincts. Surveillance feeds looped for exactly 6 minutes, the same length as Torres's tape. During those loops, frames flickered with strange anomalies. Brief silhouettes of people long dead, a woman's face blurred behind glass, a hand holding a camera that wasn't there. Technicians blamed glitches. But to those who'd followed the case, it felt like the system trying to speak in images again. In December, a live television panel discussing governmental transparency was abruptly interrupted. All channels switched to a black screen, then to static. Out of the distortion emerged a faint image, grainy, underlit, monochrome. A woman sat in a dark room, hair tied back, face shadowed. She looked straight into the camera. No chyron, no timestamp, only her voice, calm, resolute. My name is Marcy Torres. This will be my last report. Every studio fell silent. Engineers tried to cut the feed. Nothing worked. Across continents, millions watched as she continued speaking. You've been told the story ended, that the order fell, that the system corrected itself, but the truth doesn't end, it migrates. Blue Hour is no longer a secret project. It's a mindset, replicated in algorithms, training models, surveillance protocols. Every click, every lens, every frame you surrender becomes another ritual of obedience. The experiment succeeded. You're living in it. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes never moved. Ellen Ward was the beginning. I was the record. You are the continuation. Then the screen flickered. A sequence of Polaroid images flashed rapidly. Faces of officers, politicians, civilians, journalists, each frame stamped with a single word: witness. The images accelerated until they blurred into pure white. The broadcast cut to static. When programming resumed, anchors sat frozen, unsure whether to call it a hack or a haunting. Authorities denied involvement. The feed's origin couldn't be traced. Cyber forensics found no data footprint. No transmission logs existed. It was as if the broadcast had appeared directly within the signal itself. In the weeks that followed, governments doubled down on control. New legislation restricted digital privacy under the banner of national protection. For many, it was proof Torres had been right. Protests reignited worldwide, not demanding justice this time, but confession from the system itself. Yet, as always, confession never came. Somewhere in that chaos, a new message appeared on encrypted channels used by investigative journalists. It contained only coordinates and a date. The location pointed to the East River shoreline, where Pier 32 once stood. The date matched the anniversary of Ellen Ward's disappearance. On that night, a small group of reporters and activists gathered there in silence. At exactly midnight, the river lights flickered and died. For a moment, the entire skyline went dark. Then a single flash illuminated the water, white, blinding, instantaneous. No one saw who triggered it, but those present said it felt less like a camera and more like the city itself taking a photograph, freezing them inside its memory. When the lights returned, something floated at the water's edge, a waterproof case containing a Polaroid, perfectly dry. The image showed the pier from above, every person standing in their exact position. At the bottom, scrawled in blue ink, "Not the end." The case was handed to authorities, but it disappeared en route to evidence storage. Only the leaked image survived, circulating online until it became an icon. Historians now call it the last frame. Years later, students studying the Blue Hour era would debate whether the Torres broadcast was real, whether the photograph was staged, whether any of it had ever been provable. Professors called it digital folklore, the modern myth of institutional guilt. But those who had been there, those who'd felt the flash and seen the reflection of their own faces frozen in white light, never forgot. Because myths fade, photographs don't. And somewhere deep in a forgotten archive, the original Blue Hour camera still waits. Its lens cracked, film depleted, but mechanism intact. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the lights of the city pulse against the glass towers and the sirens hum through the streets, a single flash glows from the dark for just a second. No source, no explanation, no trace.